But right now, it is our pleasure to talk about one of the other big stories of the day with our pal Richard Deitsch of The Athletic, who, of course, covers sports media, does a tremendous job, and has been for a long time. And that story is that the NBA on TNT might, keyword might, not be dead yet. We've been talking about this story with Richard's colleague, Andrew Marchand, over the last couple of weeks, but the new media rights deal for the NBA stays with ESPN for the finals. NBC is definitely locked in now, and we said that TNT, Warner Brothers, the parent company, has matching rights, and they will try to exercise them, and that was kind of the big question mark. There's going to be a ton of lawyers involved. There still might be, but they have matched Amazon's part of it. Richard, hopefully I set that up well. How'd I do in the setup here?
Yeah, that's good. That's a pretty nice Cliff Notes version of everything that's been going on. You used the most important word, and the word is might, because, we're still at the point where the NBA ultimately has to make a decision from their end in terms of whether they think Amazon has a legal right to match. The likelihood, of course, and people have reported this, is that they're going to claim that there's not an equal match when it comes to Warner Brothers Discovery and Amazon, given Amazon's scale, given what Amazon can bring in terms of the number of global viewers versus WBD, particularly in streaming. So, they're going to obviously, I think, challenge that and say that this is not an actual match. And then, like everything in the world, lawyers will come in, and that's the real interesting question is, does it get settled with some kind of monetary settlement? Does it get dismissed? Does the NBA try to create a fourth package, which I think is pretty remote, or does something else happen? But that's sort of where we are now, in a bit of a holding pattern. Today, of course, Comcast came out with their quarterly earnings call, I think, with analysts, and that's when they presented all of the parts of their deal that they're going to get with the NBA, and unless something really crazy happens, none of that should change. So NBC, is pretty much locked in terms of they're going to be a future NBA rights partner. And the only thing now really we're waiting on in the end is how the Amazon WBD part's going to shake out.
So one of the big things here that was, I think, surprising to the NBA and certainly to some of y'all covering it was there was essentially, to use something that teams have done over the years, there was a poison pill in the contract where Amazon had a ton of money up front that they thought Warner Brothers wouldn't be able to match. And, well, that would have been really easy. Hey, we can't match the money up front. Very clean, no match, bang, bang. It's Amazon. It's not Warner Brothers. How surprised do you think the NBA and, to whatever extent Amazon is surprised, Amazon, that didn't just get it done and that they're going to have to make these other arguments about scale and things that sound at least less more complicated in a legal setting?
I mean, probably a little bit surprised. You'd really honestly have to, you'd need Adam Silver and Bill Koenig and the lawyers who are dealing with this to sort of know how much of a shock this was. But I think, again, the NBA, I happen to agree with their sort of logic here. I think they think that they're in good standing, that the reality is, Warner Brothers Discovery cannot match Amazon in terms of what they can present. Now, by the way, just to be clear, this has nothing to do with presentation or growth of the game or anything like that, because you have to give Warner Brothers Discovery, essentially, I'll use Turner Sports because that's the more sort of accurate description here. You have to give them their due because they've been phenomenal when it comes to how they present the NBA. They obviously have the greatest basketball show of all time. I would say the greatest sports studio show of all time. And that's a big asset. The NBA doesn't want to lose inside the NBA. They'd like to obviously have that continue in some form. So it's not really about who's presented this better. I think it really just sort of comes down to, on the NBA side, where do they think ultimately the growth is for their game heading forward? And I think if you're going to be fair, just sort of looking at this, let's say with no dog in the fight, I think you probably want to be with the bigger company here and the global company in Amazon than you would if it was Warner Brothers Discovery. I have to say I am surprised that we're here where we are now, because it would have seemed, let's say David Zaslav had played this a little bit differently, was all in on the NBA. I feel like the logical way to have solved this a year ago would have been to just give Warner Brothers Discovery a fourth package. You let ESPN, Disney, NBC and Amazon know that, hey, yeah, we know you want more inventory, but we're going to cut it into a fourth. The NBA probably gets a little less from those partners, and that's really where the issue is. No owners want to get less. But that, to me, would have really been the smart solution, because it's not like we haven't seen other major professional leagues have multiple partners. I mean, look at the NFL. Count up the amount of partners that they have, and they just added Netflix, right? So it's not like the idea somehow that 4 media rights partners would somehow be problematic. And I think that's, if in my opinion, if I was working on this a year ago, like that would have been my end game, because I think then you take care of everybody. But that's not the case. That's sort of water under the bridge. And again, I think this ultimately shakes out with NBC, Amazon, and Disney/ESPN getting it. And then finally, not to filibuster here, but it would also seem inconceivable that if you're Warner Brothers Discovery, you want to go into an 11-year agreement with a rights holder partner that you're fighting with or potentially suing. That just doesn't make, what I'm saying? Like doesn't
Right.
make any kind of business sense. Like it'd be basically entering into some kind of business partnership with a partner or a spouse that you just divorced and said you couldn't get along with. You know what I mean? It makes no business sense if you just sort of play it out logically.
Richard Deitsch, sports media reporter for The Athletic, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So I guess one of the questions that I wrestle with, Richard, as an observer who is in media, but also as just a viewer who wants to experience these things like everybody else and watch games, is something you mentioned there with like the fourth package. And, we're going to talk about the WNBA's place in this agreement because they have similar, they just signed a new rights deal and it's with all the same partners that the NBA did. It's kind of wrapped into this in some ways. Maybe it's not. You can help sort that out in a second. But as a WNBA fan, like finding games sometimes is a pain in the ass because they do have so many partners. And finding, NWSL games is a pain in the ass. I think Fox and CBS for the NFL, it's now a little bit harder. It used to be like, oh, it's an NFC team, then it's on Fox, CBS. And even then, like on a Sunday, it's one of two options. But what are, I guess the question that I have after this, speaking of filibustering, long rambling setup is, what is the value of something like Inside the NBA to a brand and that brand value and a clean user experience versus there are more bodies out there that will watch Amazon potentially, and more bodies equals more money, and it is just purely raw financial upside?
Yeah, well, Craig, we're talking about a question. I need a legal pad to figure this one out.
Sorry.
So, I'm playing with you. There's value in Inside the NBA, like significant in terms of like brand awareness. It's obviously a great entertainment vehicle, but that's not what this is about. Like ultimately what this is about is distribution and capital and who can pay. So as great as Inside the NBA is, you're not going to be the league's board of governors and somehow be like, we have to stick with Warner Brothers Discovery because they have Inside the NBA when Amazon is offering, billions of dollars. That's just not how it's gonna play out. I sympathize with you and other consumers in terms of, if we want to watch all the stuff, we have to get like all these different streaming packages and all these different cable packages. But that is now the reality of sports. Like that we're not going back to a different place. Trust me, I think a lot of these companies absolutely price gouge their consumers. I think, quite frankly, the NFL, and even we've seen it with the NBA, they're pretty greedy just in terms of it's only all about the sort of the buck. It's not about consumer friendliness. But that's just the reality of sports today. And in many ways, it's a business for upper middle class people or younger people with discretionary income. The reality is, if you're a diehard in a sport, this as a soccer guy, right? You just have to pay the freight for a number of these streaming services if you want to see all these games you want to see. What the networks and the media companies will say is, hey, we're not a nonprofit. We're not the BBC here. If we have to pay these rights fees for these sports, we have to then sell advertising inventory, and we have to sell subscriptions to our streaming service in order to pay for this and make a profit. So I'm with you, but I don't even think that's much of a calculus anymore for a lot of these leagues. I don't like it. I think baseball especially has been so foolish putting all these different postseason games on all these different outlets, but sports leagues just don't think like that. They think in terms of who ultimately can provide us with the greatest dollars for media rights, and two, who can ultimately provide us with some decent reach. And the NBA is going to gamble. In some ways, it's a little bit of a gamble for sure. that Amazon is going to continue to grow as a sports entity. And if you go with Amazon, that opens you up to a 200 million plus global audience and not just a U.S. domestic audience.
Yeah, which for a sport like basketball, global sport, makes a whole lot of sense. What's the W's role in all of this, and what did you make of the media deal that they signed, where immediately the PA was like, "We have some questions here. I mean, it's record-setting, it's large, it's got some outs in the contract, but there were immediate questions of whether they got enough." What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where the WNBA PA is coming from. Like, there's arguments on both sides. Should they be outside of the NBA when it comes to these negotiations, or should they be within? I'm still one who thinks that they should combine it with the NBA. So I think the NBA's marketing muscle, has significant value. I think the NBA can put pressure on the partners to put these games on the most, on the sort of platforms that have significant reach, over the air network stuff. Could they have squeezed out more money if they weren't on their own? I mean, the answer is maybe, but I don't know. Ultimately, I would say that there's more leverage in sort of being connected to the NBA because you're sitting across with the NBA and you really want the NBA inventory. So I think you're going to give the WNBA a good shake. And this is not the sort of WNBA is no charity case anymore. I mean, man, I just wrote today, they just drew 3.44 million viewers for their All-Star game. That's a massive number. I mean,
right.
They're not so far now from the NBA All-Star game, MLB All-Star game, a couple million away from all of these. So, I mean, that's a real number and a big number. And, you've seen what Caitlin Clark and this rookie class has sort of done in terms of game-changing audience. So I know where the PA is coming from. My sense from that statement I read is I think they just wanted to be more involved in the negotiations. And, knowing the NBA, obviously Kathy Engelbert's involved, but it's, there's a small group of people who negotiate for the NBA. I like, in terms of what I've seen of the deal so far, that NBC gets involved because I think for the NBA Finals, I think NBC will really, one, it'll be on over-the-air NBC, and two, I think they'll really promote the hell out of it. So that's pretty good. You obviously have to keep ESPN in there, and I think ESPN now seems to be committed to many more games on ABC, which I think is good for the league. I would expect ESPN to do more shoulder programming. I mean, I'll be stunned next year if you don't see a daily WNBA/women's basketball show during the WNBA season. I think Amazon is interesting for the WNBA because, one, they have a partnership there already, and two, again, potential for that many more homes. And then, there's nothing that could prevent from extra games going on ION, which has been a great partner for the WNBA right now. And then we'll see how it works with League Pass. I think a lot of people, including myself, you watch a lot of these games through League Pass, the ones that aren't on national TV, and, you hope the League Pass still provides a ton of inventory. So I think, again, it's easy for me to say from 10,000 feet above. I think they did pretty good with this deal. The only thing I would have changed, let's say if I was one of the negotiators in the room, I would not have had a long-term deal. I would have had a 5 or 6 or 4 year deal and gambled that Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and, Juju Watkins eventually to follow. These women continue to grow the game to a different level. And then maybe in 4 years' time, I got even more leverage to renegotiate this deal.
No, I totally agree. And I think I read there's a 3-year out on the W side for them.
Okay,
and
actually, you know what? I didn't know that. So there you go.
So if that's accurate, I feel like there's no way that in 3 years they're not going with the growth trajectory that they're already on, and like you said, the names that are coming. I just feel like there's no way that in 3 years they're not.
I would say this. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say for that league, it needs two things. You're already starting to see it. You need more rivalries, individual player rivalries, and that's where Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark have really helped because you need people to tune in to games that maybe necessarily aren't the two best teams in the league, but they're compelling players against each other. And then the other thing I would say, just given how popular Caitlin Clark is, you need that team to get better. You need the Fever to be a top 5, top 4 team, which, if the GM hopefully drafts well or if they make trades, the other good thing about the WNBA now is free agency is now a real thing. So great players can change sides. And I would think if you're, a player who wants marketing money, you would want to play with Caitlin Clark. So that's the other thing that the league needs. It's just like the NFL. It's okay if the Cowboys are 9-7 or 10-7. You can't have them at 2-14. So that's the one thing I think the WNBA needs is they need the Indiana Fever to get better.
No, 100%. And by the way, it should be along this 3-year timeline too. You have the San Francisco Bay Area market coming in, and you have Toronto coming in. So the league itself is going to grow, new markets. So it'll be fun to see. But we wait with bated breath for the lawyers on the NBA side in the meantime when it comes to Turner and Amazon. Richard, always appreciate having you, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and I'm sure we'll be talking down the line.
Yeah, watch out for Team Canada against Team USA in men's basketball.
Eyes are there. Apparently, just don't play the South Sudan if you're Team USA. That's I think what we learned this weekend.
Exactly. Good to be with you, Craig.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.